Welcome and thank you for joining us today for this webinar as we discuss maritime cybersecurity risks, the role technology and regulations play, and how companies can better prepare for potential attacks. Before we begin, I'd like to go over how you can submit questions to today's speakers. Located on the left-hand side of your screen is a chat box. You may submit your questions at any time, and we'll address as many as possible during the Q&A portion of today's webinar. And please note that if we do not get to your question, we will follow up afterward with an answer. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Joining us today are Paul Sells and Samir Balotra. Paul is the president and CEO for ABS Wavesight, leading development and innovation of purpose-built, integrated, data-driven solutions that help clients gain more visibility into their existing operations to mitigate risk and deliver operational excellence. Paul served in the U.S. Navy, where he was a lead petty officer, and graduated from the University of Tennessee with a degree in mechanical engineering and received a Master of Business Administration from the College of William & Mary. Samir is the co-founder and CEO of ActZero. Samir is driving ActZero's strategy and evolution as the industry's leading managed detection and response service provider. His experience spans the U.S. government, leading research universities and the security products industry. He is a member of the U.S. State Department Foreign Affairs Policy Board and the U.S. Secret Service Cyber Investigations Advisory Board. And with that, I'll go ahead and kick it over to Paul and Samir, starting with the question of how is changing maritime technology affecting security needs?
Great question. I work in maritime technology, so Samir, I might lead off on this one. Broadly, maritime technology is digitalizing at an accelerating pace year over year. So we're bringing more solutions to market. We're relying more and more on software. More people in our value chains are relying more on the way that they interact with software and add value to those information systems as well as they accomplish their jobs. Now, we're a very physical industry, as everybody who works in shipping knows, but we do generate a tremendous amount of data, and we're going through this transformation right now where we're learning how to capture that information, capture that data, leverage it to make better decisions and improve outcomes for owners, for operators, for charters, for all stakeholders involved. So as we're going through this transition, we're relying more on connectivity than ever before. So everything from the sensor on the vessel to the phone with which I occasionally approve expense reports. These access points are becoming more and more prolific, and they're more and more a part of the way that we do business in maritime every day. So as maritime technology expands, it creates an environment that might be more attractive to some potential bad actors. Samir, do you have maybe a different take on this?
Yeah, Paul, thank you very much. What I'm worried about is that the hackers want to attack sectors that are modernizing. They see that people in the shipping and the maritime industry are using their phones to do business now more, using laptops more than ever, connected to the cloud, connected to the world, connected to IoT. And that connectivity is just an invitation for hackers. And I think we're seeing the pace of cyber attacks and threats against the maritime sector accelerating very quickly. So while we need to modernize, we need to also modernize security defenses to keep up.
Well said. That's a great response. That's how I see it. That's how I guess Samir sees it as well. These access points and the value of the targets to these potential bad actors is pretty enticing.
Great. So what regulations are in place now that might require better security, and how do companies address these?
The regulations for cybersecurity in the maritime industry are still relatively nascent. I mean, there are IMO guidelines that are coming on that are in place right now that companies can become more and more compliant with. Additionally, we'll see regulations around software for port security come online starting next year as well in the EU. So quite a few places that we're tracking, but as the industry sort of transitions from guidelines to eventual regulations, it's something that we have to watch very closely as tool makers to make sure that we're complying. There are general guidelines for security provider or for software providers, regardless of industry, that everyone should be compliant with, and we as a technology provider are of course with those as well, ISO standards, SOC standards, et cetera. I'm curious though, Samir, as you've seen other sort of industries modernize, how has this transition from regulation, from guideline to regulation sort of played out?
Yeah, Paul, as a cybersecurity guy, I've seen this movie before. Many other sectors, the power sector, the water sector, nuclear power generation, healthcare sector, so many critical infrastructure sectors have gone through this same journey, right? They start a little bit outdated in the technology side, but they're critical to the economies and national security of so many countries. And then the government starts inching forward. Here are some guidelines. And then here are some light regulations, but without too much enforcement. And then here's some fines, and then here's some laws, and then here's some contract requirements. And it ends in a place where you have to meet your government's or multiple governments' requirements in order to do business at all. In order to sell to the government, for sure, but even in order to sell to other critical infrastructure entities in your country. Now, if you're a multinational firm or sector like shipping, you've got to support all of the country's requirements, because you're going to put your ships in their ports and you're going to send your data through their countries and you're going to hire their employees and buy material and supply from them. And it becomes very challenging. You got to keep up with this. And what I find is if businesses in maritime can keep up with the guidelines and the voluntary, suggestions that are in place now, that will lead to a better outcome where the government trusts the maritime sector and they work with them to create fair regulations that don't hurt your business too much and actually help. Whereas I think if the businesses end up kind of lagging here and not following the voluntary guidelines and not following the suggestions, the government will get fed up and come down with a much harder regulatory hammer. So I always encourage companies on this journey to follow those suggestions and guidelines very well and very closely, because you'll get to a better kind of collaborative place in the end.
Well, great. Well, we're certainly on that path now. It seems like, as you said, you've seen this movie before. We may be in the early acts, but we're on the journey.
So what would you say some of the most critical cybersecurity challenges facing the industry?
Generally, it's ransomware. Ransomware attacks are number one, first and foremost, top of everyone's list. There are organized crime groups around the world, and these are real, effective, organized businesses run by criminal groups who are perpetrating ransomware attacks on companies large and small. And they know and they plan these attacks to go after critical businesses who can't afford to have downtime and will, in a panic, pay a ransom. These ransoms can range from, 1 or 2 million US dollars at the low end for a small business, all the way up to 10 million, 30 million and up for larger companies. This is millions of dollars of downtime, from a ransomware attack that took just minutes to hit you. So I think it's ransomware above all else. Below that, we also see people attacking email to steal business records and embarrass people, right? If you steal an executive's or a CEO's, internal emails about some plans that are happening, that can be really damaging. Again, they're asking for ransom or they're using it for extortion. Those are the top two things that we see today.
What can a ransomware attack look like for a company? And maybe let's talk about why the first 15 minutes after a threat detected is so critical.
Let me first go before the 15 minutes. What happens in the kind of days and months leading up are the ransomware attackers are very planning ahead. They are not just randomly shotgun attacking companies anymore. They are targeting companies when they're on downtime, when they're on nights and weekends in their part of the world, where their key administrators are on vacation. They absolutely plan to hit companies when they're not paying attention, when they're weak. So often Saturday morning will be a common time that we see ransomware attacks come in. And they will get their malware into the computer systems in a quiet way that you don't notice at first. And the malware will spread from, say Paul's laptop, hopefully it's not Paul, to a database full of very important information, to an administrator's account that has access to even more important information. And they will do that hopping around until they get to the crown jewels, the stuff they really want to steal. Financial information, bank account information, personally identifiable information, intellectual property. And then the ransomware attack hits. That's like T = 0. You see a ransom note on the machines. All kinds of machines are blocked and bricked. You can't use them. Customers can't access. Employees can't do their work. It's downtime. That's when the panic, bat signal goes up. At that point, you really got a small number of minutes, as you asked me here, 15 minutes or so, to respond properly. What you need to do are block those ransomware executables and quarantine the endpoints, laptops and workstations that are affected before it spreads. You have just minutes to do that well. Otherwise, it will spread through the whole company's network and the losses are much larger. Worse, if you don't stop it in 15 minutes, the malware will spread to your backup servers, where you've backed up your data, right? And encrypt that as well. Now you can't even restore from backups. And that will, take a 2-day ransomware attack cleanup into a multi-month cleanup if you don't have the backups. So what you need to do is stop those files, quarantine those endpoints before the attack spreads, and spin up your war room. What I mean by war room is you need to have your general counsel involved, right? Your finance leads involved to lock down the bank accounts. You need to get all the executives on standby, your PR team involved to start giving information to the customers and the public, and of course your regulatory affairs people, because the government's going to want to know what's happening too. And you need to spin up that war room right away, so everyone's on the same page. So those first 15 minutes are really critical, both on the technical side to stop the spread of the ransomware attack, but also on the business side to get all those functional leaders ready for the battle ahead.
That is a nightmare scenario that I don't wish on anyone. As someone who works in the business, you've seen this a number of times. We simply work to prepare to be as ready as possible for when something like that could occur.
Yeah, Paul, and it'll take 5-6 figures of US dollars per year to protect yourself from a ransomware attack. That would cost you millions or tens of millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Literally like 100-to-1 ratio on prevention before the fact versus cleanup costs after the fact.
So speaking of costs, maybe let's dive a little bit deeper into what the cost of ransomware attacks truly is.
I've got some sobering history to share with you guys. If you don't mind, I'll jump in of what's happened in the shipping sector. And like I mentioned, these attacks have really increased recently. So going back to 2017, 6 years ago, Maersk, the famous shipping company based out of Denmark, had a major malware attack that hit all of their servers. Quote from their IT teams, 100% destruction of anything on Microsoft at Maersk. 49,000 laptops and 3,000 servers were bricked. 350 million US dollars in total losses from that ransomware attack. That was 2017, 6 years ago. Going to something more recent, in 2021, the K-Line out of Japan. 2 breaches in the same year, and the largest took 10 whole days to contain. Imagine 10 days of downtime for a shipping company. All right, next, June of the same year, HMM in South Korea. Shipping company was hacked, again, days of downtime. A few months later, CMA CGM out of France, shipping company, lost their customer data and their trust. 2 months later, November 2021, Swire Pacific out of Singapore lost confidential information, proprietary PII. Now, fast forwarding to later that same month, Danaus in Greece. You probably read this in the news. They had a cyber attack that caused them to have disrupted communications with their fleets. They couldn't talk to their fleets for a period of time. That's disastrous. And then more recently, just a couple months ago in January of this year, DNV in Norway experienced a targeted ransomware attack on their ship manager software that hit over 1,000 of their vessels. So just in summary, hundreds of millions of dollars of losses, weeks or more of downtime, inability to talk to your ships, thousands of vessels hit by ransomware. And, this is just destroying these companies and the industry. So we need to get ahead of this and do better.
What nightmare scenarios? This is something that certainly keeps us up and ready, and something we think about actively as a technology provider. Reputation and trust would be absolutely impacted. Not to mention the financial ramifications of trying to make remediate any harm done to our customers. It would be disastrous. This is a critically important but often overthought or overlooked dimension of digitalization, and that's part of the reason we wanted to have this. We want to have this conversation today, is to raise awareness about not only what some of the outcomes are, but what can be done about it as well. So, this is definitely something that we take seriously and have to take seriously.
And Paul, just to build on that, one thing I'm seeing is, after an attack, after the hundreds of millions of dollars of cleanup costs, you've got to hopefully restore your customers' trust. But another problem I'm seeing is people doing procurement, governments and large companies now have cybersecurity performance in their list of variables that they're assessing. Mm-hmm. So they will look at a company's recent past performance in cyber defense as well, right? As they're making their decision, right? Of course, what's the cost of the service? Do I trust the management? But how's their cyber defense?
Sure.
And that assessment is now going to put you in a better or worse position going forward to win contracts.
All right. Finally, how can companies be better prepared for cyber attacks?
The first thing I would say is to get prepared, make a plan, make an investment in ensuring that you understand the systems that you're using and you understand what controls you have in place, both with people and with technologies. Just get a plan to begin with. Is a great place to start. Samir, you've done this a number of times. What would you say?
Well, Paul, you're 100% right. I talk to so many companies that have no plan. And I just ask them, what would you do if you had a ransomware attack? And most of the time, they don't have a good plan or really any plan. And so I think you're right. Planning ahead makes all the difference here. Most companies have someone who's leading security, a chief information security officer. If you don't, you can hire a contract, virtual, fractional chief information security officer to do that for you. That's the person who can help you build your plan. Got to start there. But to get into the technical details, the first technical thing that I recommend is two-factor authentication. That's when, you log in and it sends a text to your phone, or you use an authenticator app on your phone to type in an extra code. That will stop a lot. Some people say 90% of cyber attacks on you in your email. It won't stop all ransomware attacks, but it will stop attacks on your accounts. And if you're an executive in a company, you're a weak link. Hackers know you, they can see your name, you're public, and they're going to attack you with fake emails to get into your email and then burrow through your company from there. So two-factor authentication can really help. Most services have that optional that you can turn on. I highly recommend that. It's an easy thing to do. Sometimes it's free. After that, I really recommend, a managed detection response service. And that's what ActZero has built for companies here. The reason is it provides kind of a whole set of things that you need to meet your insurance requirements, your procurement requirements, most of your regulatory requirements, all in one bundle. Really easy way to buy a whole service. Press the easy button and get that defense you need. So what does it do? You need to have some software running on your endpoints, right? You used to have antivirus in your laptop. Antivirus doesn't work well anymore. There's modern technology, though, that you do need to run on your endpoints, your laptops and servers. Another thing is your network security. You have firewalls. Looking at email traffic from overseas, you need to have those firewalls being monitored so that they can stop the latest attacks from foreign countries where attacks are coming from. The next thing you need is to protect your email, like I mentioned, looking for those malicious email attacks, and your cloud. If you're using cloud services like Amazon or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud Platform, you need to be monitoring that as well because you got sensitive data there. Finally, identity. You're using Okta to log in or OneLogin or Gmail accounts to log in or your corporate login. You need to look at that identity information, specifically logins, to make sure no one's hijacking your accounts and getting into your company. Those are just 5 examples of things that you want to cover. And it's not just technology. You need smart humans. You need investigators who are experts in cybersecurity to be monitoring all this and watching everything and taking the best of what technology does and mixing it with the best of what humans do to find those cyber attacks before they happen. Those moments before that boom, for that 15-minute window. And so a managed detection response service does all this and more so that it protects all your technology, provides that human expertise, and satisfies your security requirements all in one.
Thanks again, Paul and Samir, for this very relevant, very eye-opening discussion. It looks like a few questions have started rolling in. So let's start with this one. I think, Samir, you might have just touched on this one, but maybe just to reiterate, what would you suggest is the first step that a company should take to increase protection against potential attacks?
Make a plan, multi-factor authentication, and then really outsource this to a service.
Yeah.
I'd say, people used to try to build their own security ops center and their whole security ops function, and frankly, just generally fail at it. It's too expensive. It doesn't work that well. I would hire professionals like you do with anything else to do the job. Make a plan, two-factor authentication, and then hire a service that you trust.
Excellent. All right. So the next question here is, would you say there are any particularly weak spots in our industry that are more prone to attacks than others?
I'll take this one since I happen to apparently be one. The people are the weak, and the way that we interface with technology. So executives that have to approve things, have to review things. We use our mobile phones all the time for this. Mobile phones are a difficult place to secure. We're on it doing, managing our personal lives, managing our professional lives. So there might be some overlap as well. So that would be my answer. Samir, what would you say?
I agree, Paul. I think the hackers are targeting executives, especially in critical infrastructure companies, because like you said, they're the ones who are approving payroll and finance transactions and contracts, and they're the ones who are publicly visible and out there attracting attention. So it's easy for the hackers to target them and very lucrative. So executives approving things, especially on their phones. Usually companies are not issuing, separate phones to employees. They're letting people bring their own personal phones to work. And while that's really convenient, personal phones are full of other apps like Facebook and social media and pictures from the family and things that can confuse the issue here. So I think executives using their phones to approve things is very dangerous. It's a serious weak link right now.
Okay, moving right along, what does the implementation timeline look like for cybersecurity solutions?
In the old days, a company couldn't really get good service providers. They had to try to do this themselves in pieces. I'll buy these dozen pieces of cyber defense software, and I'll buy a firewall and an email security, right? And cloud security and antivirus, and try to stitch it together. And then I need to hire a half dozen security people to stay up 24/7 and monitor the alerts and make sure nothing's going wrong. That's very expensive. And it used to take months or even years to get a mature cybersecurity system in place, the cost of millions of dollars a year. But now there are really great services like we've been talking about here. And I'm proud that ActZero is one of those services that make it really easy. We can install our entire system at a company in about 5 hours, about half a day. That's it. Way better and way cheaper than it used to be.
Okay, looks like we have another question that's come through here. This one, it says, I appreciate the discussion around guidelines and government regulations, but what about cyber insurance?
You know, many companies who are not so focused on cybersecurity, they are focused on getting insurance. Their executives and their CFOs saying, we got to get insurance, especially cyber insurance. And these days, you can't even get cyber insurance at all unless you have a certain cyber defense program in place. Not just a plan like Paul mentioned, but actually a cyber defense program. Because the reason is these companies' risk is too high to even get insurance. The insurers will not cover them, give them any premium at all, unless they buy down that risk by having a service provider in place. So I recommend you do that plan, that two-factor authentication, but then have a service provider monitoring, like I mentioned, your computers, your firewall, your email, your cloud, your identity, and you show that that's being monitored 24/7 to the insurer, and then you can get your insurance at a good price.
Great. And then here's a question around AI. So it says, we hear a lot about AI these days, but how does this play into all of this, this cybersecurity situation?
Yeah, AI is all the rage these days, generative AI, ChatGPT, but you may not know that the security industry has actually been building in AI for years, like ActZero.ai 5 years ago started building it in. And what AI does is it weeds through all of those signals of maybe cyber attack. Maybe this is somebody hijacking Paul's account. Maybe this is a piece of ransomware coming. And it finds the actual cyber attack so that you don't have false alarms all the time. Weeds through that noise and finds that actual signal. The other thing AI can do is when it's confident there's an attack is happening, it can automatically send a quarantine action to your computer. So instead of waking up a human around the world to think about it, it can automatically, in less than a second, send that quarantine signal right to your computer. That's how you can stop a ransomware attack in its tracks. AI weeding out the noise to find the real attacks, and then taking those automated response actions in real time to stop the attacks.
All right, and then another question here says, a lot of solutions require talking to the internet and cloud, but what about the intermittent connectivity that we rely on with ships?
Yeah, a lot of our customers go in and out of service. That environment is changing a little bit as constant connectivity, high bandwidth, low latency connectivity proliferates. But it is the case, and it will be with us for quite a while to come. It requires us to do things to replicate information to ensure that it's consistent from the vessel to the enterprise systems back at the office. But it does create some additional work to be done in the data that needs to be moved across the systems as well. So it's a unique situation for maritime in a lot of ways. Although technologically it happens in other industries certainly. It is just something that's sort of part and parcel of the ships as well. Samir, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, let me jump on that. Now that ActZero and ABS Wavesight have come together, thanks to Paul, and I've learned a lot about ship and shore. And it turns out the ships are not always internet connected, like Paul mentioned. And so you can't rely on a cyber defense solution that always needs internet connectivity. It's always talking to headquarters. And you can't only protect headquarters, you got to protect the ships too. So, we've got a service here that answers the mail. It runs software on every computer on the ships that's always looking for cyber attacks, whether it's connected to the internet or not. And then it's also talking to the cloud, right, to the AI brain back at headquarters to get the latest attack signals and information as well. And so I think this hybrid approach of having cyber defense on the ship computers, not requiring connection, and also an AI back at headquarters updating new information is the right way to protect the shipping industry.
Okay, just looking through the questions here, I think we might have time for a couple more. Okay, this is a really good one, guys. I am a chief security officer of a shipping company, and I'd love to create a cybersecurity program. How do I convince my CEO and board to fund such a program?
That's a fantastic question. I talk to a lot of CEOs. I talk to a lot of boards. I talk to a lot of people about where to invest in technology as well. And people generally invest in technology or in processes, for that matter, to make money or to save money. A lot of times in operations, you become more focused on risk aversion or risk avoidance or cost avoidance. But perhaps there's a way to think about this from the perspective of capturing more business as well. So don't leave out your thinking about how to frame it in that way to your board or your CEO. Samir?
Yeah, let me jump onto that. I think people buy from people they trust. People buy from companies that they trust. And I think the best way to show trust these days is to protect their data and be good at cyber defense. I think it's an upside, differentiator for a business to be good at security and therefore more trusted. Customers will buy from you more. Governments will sign you up to procurement contracts more. You get the benefit of the doubt in the public sector when you're trusted. So I see it as a differentiator. If you're a chief security officer, go to your board and say, yeah, it'll cost X, Y, Z, but it will actually be a differentiator for our business. It should actually drive sales if we're the most trusted, entity in our field.
Okay, well, I think we have time for one final question here as we're coming up on time. So let's go with this one. How can I learn more about the specific solutions ActZero and ABS Wavesight provide regarding maritime cybersecurity?
Reach out to us. That's happy to have those conversations. We have specialists who are set up to answer that question for whatever your situation is, whatever your circumstances. Yeah, reach out to us at either our websites, or there's some information in the webinar here for contacts as well.
Thanks, Paul. If I could just add, I always recommend that businesses call people you trust, who know your business, right? Yeah. If you're in the shipping sector, you call ABS and Paul for advice, right? You want cybersecurity help, you call people like me and ActZero for advice. Find people who are experts in what you do, who you think you can trust. And the second thing I'd say is call them before your cyber attack. We know you'll call us when you're in the middle of a breach, but at that point, it's a cleanup job, right? And we can do that too, but we'd much rather talk to you before. Like Paul said, make a plan. Call us when you're making your plan. Get some good advice. Call us before the cyber attack, not after.
Okay, great. Well, we are at time here, so thank you again, Paul and Samir, for hosting this maritime cybersecurity discussions. Again, if you have any additional questions or need help with maritime tech and cybersecurity solutions, ABS Wavesight and ActZero can offer a tailored approach to your use case. We thank all of the participants of today's event again. This has been a great discussion and one that we certainly hope to continue. In the meantime, if you're looking for additional information on these topics, or if you're interested in speaking to one of our specialists, please see the contact information on the screen here, as well as links to our websites below. And also, please watch your inbox for a survey following today's webinar. We greatly appreciate any and all feedback. So again, that wraps up today's webinar. Thank you for attending and have a great rest of your day.